This panel is Wine Tourism Innovations Across the U.S. and Beyond. Our moderator is Wanda Mann, East Coast editor of the SOMM Journal. She is also a native New Yorker. That's New York City, where I'm a native of too.
Don't be shy. You can shout for New York.
Yeah. She's also been a host of many of our virtual tastings and has done a fantastic job and written an article about New York sparkling wines. Today, she is leading a conversation about wine tourism, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Sam. Well, thank you all for being here. I hear we're competing with some pretty fabulous pastries next door, but we'll do our best to make this sweet and appetizing as well. And to quote Phyllis Fetter, who I've never met before, but I think we're going to have some zippy to doo-dah in this panel as well. So thank you. So Sam said I'm Wanda, and with the SOMM Journal and Tasting Panel, you probably maybe have seen my writing in food and wine, decanter, vine pair. So I'm a certified wine nerd. I'm someone who loves wine and I love communicating about it. So it's true that wine inspires wanderlust, whether it's what we see on social media, film, literature, fear of missing out. Wine gets people to travel. And it's fueling a really exciting time in the tourism industry where people are planning their getaways around regions. So we have a wonderful panel today. Two will be appearing virtually. We have two on the stage, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with our panelists on screen so they don't feel left out. So let's start with Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Yaffe. I'm one of the co-founders and chief operating officer of AnyRoad. We are an experiential marketing platform that wineries, breweries, and distilleries use for tours and tastings and events to help actually understand ROI, measure its output as far as how it's helping to sell more wine and start to actually optimize it and improve them. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Daniel. And Diane.
Hi, my name is Diana, and I represent a company called Winerist. Winerist is a specialist in wine and food travel experiences all around the world. As a company, we've got a marketplace. We also have a high-end concierge service. We have a technology business, which is the equivalent of OpenTable, but for wineries. And in addition to that, we also have an agency business, which looks after the interests of wineries and wine hotels all around the world and brings them into this more digitally demanding era that we're all living in.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And to my left, Maryam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maryam Ahmed. I am a Binghamton, New York native, visiting from Napa, California, where I now live. I own Maryam and Company, and we offer brand extension programs for clients that are really hoping to champion food and wine as well as their purpose-driven missions. And part of what I do under Maryam and Company is offer Field Blends Wine Travel, which launched last year and will be running in Finger Lakes this June. So that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Great. And last but not least, we had a last minute change to the program. Brittany Gibson wasn't able to join us. So I don't you remember the 1998 Grammys when Pavarotti was too sick to sing and he called his good friend Aretha Franklin to sing Nessun Dorma, the great Puccini aria. So filling in as our very own Aretha, Erin McMurrough, brand manager for Lakewood Vineyards. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Wanda. Yes, I am the brand manager for Lakewood Vineyards. I started at Lakewood in 2012, first in wholesale, and then moved over to the marketing side. And I am working on launching my own passion project, which is a sparkling wine sustainably grown, just using Finger Lakes grapes.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. So I think the first thing to ask is really what is going on in the wine tourism industry? We're hearing bits and pieces. We're seeing things in television. So Maryam, as someone who's bringing people on these experiences, maybe give us an overview of the landscape from your perspective.
Of course. So my perspective is really, I think, probably very different from everyone else in that I'm not running a full-time travel program. What we're doing with Field Blends is very curated and it's once annually. And in addition to that, in the work that I'm doing with clients, it can vary from associations with a lot of different members to single winery brands. At the end of the day, everyone is asking, how can we get access to more customers and more customer segments? A lot of what we've already talked about today. And so what we do for Maryam and Company is help them discover like new markets and also help new markets discover them. And the reason why I bring that up is because that is an area where I think even in tourism, we're seeing some struggle with, but also some really innovative ideas on how to make all of that happen. The other thing that I think that's going on in tourism is still this recovery phase, this level of unpredictability that's been going on for years. And now everyone is sort of dipping their toe back in and a little bit unsure. And the things that, for me anyway, that are resonating with my clients and their beneficiaries is the connectivity element of what people are able to offer when someone walks into their door or into their virtual door. And I think the virtual component of wine tourism is still very existent, but I'll leave it at that and let everyone else jump in.
Erin, would you like to add something? What do you see as being at a winery tourism? What's happening from your end?
We're seeing a real shift to the authenticity. That's a word that has been brought up a lot today. And I'm also speaking with my Seneca Lake Wine Trail hat. Obviously, Brittany is the executive director and she is much more well-versed. But just the shift that we're seeing in our events, that we're making them more about the process itself, because people want to get out in the vineyards. They want to be walking around the vines. They want to be talking to the winemaker. All of that is very true. They're not just there to put on a party hat and have fun. So I think we are reacting to that and offering more authentic experiences in the tasting room.
So Diana, I spent some time on the Winerist website and it was really impressive, just the diversity of offerings, not just in regions. You had some really luxurious experiences, a private helicopter, I believe, in Catalonia, and then others that are a little more intimate. So I just loved, how does Winerist works? How do you gather those types of experiences in one place on your site?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So obviously there are a lot of marketplaces like ours that specialize in day tours and day activities all around the world. I guess where Winerist really stands out is that we specialize in just wine tourism. So that is the core of our product offering. So because of that, what we do is we take a very different approach from other OTAs when it comes to onboarding products. So our team goes and actively identifies, researches, test drives this product, and then the invitation goes out to that particular supplier to actually sign up to the website. It's virtually impossible to sign up to Winerist and to get approved on there unless we are aware of it. So the team has to physically go in, make sure that we're okay with the description, with the photography, and very often Airbnb style, if we're not happy with the photography, then what we do is we will go in location and we will spend time taking the pictures ourselves and ensuring that we can tell the story best way possible. For us, we feel that product selection and ensuring that the quality of the product is as high as possible and is aligned, the quality and price are always aligned, is essential, especially in this world that we're living in post-COVID. As we know, even the mid-level consumer is spending a lot more on travel than they was spending before the pandemic, and that applies to experiences in particular. So, but because of that, they're also a lot pickier, so their expectations are a lot higher. So it's a lot easier to get it wrong. We simply cannot afford to risk that. We can't afford for our customers to have a negative experience. So because of that, there is a much greater investment in the product vetting, the product upload, and obviously in the way that we market it. And we would like to see more and more of our kind of competitors doing the same thing, because we feel that it's really essential. Because this world of wine travel is so small that one customer having a negative experience can have quite a big impact on them not wanting to have a wine experience again. If that experience is commercial, average, and so on and so forth, and it's below par, especially not in line with what they've spent, the spillover effect is a lot greater than, let's say, having a average experience at the Eiffel Tower and then telling everyone about it. People are just going to keep on going to the Eiffel Tower. If people hear that they had a really bad experience at the winery, the product was too expensive, then the likelihood of them recommending it to their friends is actually very small. So we try to vet, to spend a lot of time in terms of improving that product, but we also spend a lot of time working with our suppliers and I guess making their product more sellable. So we try to give them advice as to whether the pricing is right, whether we feel that it is correlated to the quality that they are, that they're delivering. And then over time, we have seen changes, especially now when we see in certain regions like Tuscany, the price going up as much as 65% in 48 months. We have to really manage the customer expectations. We've gone from spending 350 euros on a private tour to spending 520 euros on a private tour. So that's a huge jump. And obviously the quality, has it really changed, or has the experience changed? That, that is where we come in, and that is where we have to spend a lot of time to tell the story and to ensure that our providers can tell the story too.
Great. Thank you, Diana. So, I mean, it sounds like business is booming. People are traveling. Tourism is up. So why are we here? And I think, Daniel, that's where you come in. I went to your website and it says AnyRoad, you streamline and scale operations for your experiential marketing program to increase efficiency and revenue, because this is a business, with the Experience Manager. What does that mean?
Thank you. So we're a software platform, and I think going back to like the history of wine tourism, if you think about this, brands, early Napa days, early wine centers threw their doors open. People wanted to find out how the wine was made, and then a lot of brands figured out you could charge for that, $5, $10, and then it had its own P&L, and people realized this is actually a powerhouse. And over time, a lot of brands have started to mature to say, wow, this is actually the most incredible opportunity to market our brand that we have. And so where we come in, and this is very interesting post-COVID, because doors were all shut, and a lot of people said, great, we're throwing open our doors. Why are we doing this, right? Why are we investing in these tastings and tours, and how can we actually improve it? So what we do as a company, we're a platform that brands use to run their tastings and tours, but gather that live data to understand what's actually working, what's not. And so if you're a winery and the goal is to sell bottles, only from visitors who are coming to do tours and tastings, how do you optimize that? Right? How do you get somebody in the door and make sure that they have an experience that's tailored toward what their likes and needs are, that is going to get them to walk out with a case or with a few bottles? And how do you understand when something's not working, and how do you start to iterate? I think more and more wineries need to differentiate, understand their audience, understand what's working and what's not. And that's how we think about this world, really from that winery point of view.
Great. Something that came up in the previous panel that was excellent about bringing the younger generation to wine is just this idea of cultivating a relationship. And the wine may be the entry point, but how do you make that a long-term relationship? So I knew for you, Maryam, that's part of your business is maybe introducing new audiences to wine. But before we get to that, how do you work with the winery, for example? Maybe you love their wine. It's a beautiful winery, but they don't maybe have the type of program you're looking for. What are some of the things that are key today, other than making a great wine and having a tasting room, that would make you say, I want to add that to field blends?
Sure. So I'll talk about field blends next, but talk about this part now. Got it. Okay. So it kind of builds on what we were talking about this morning. This idea that I think they were saying earlier, like, you need to see yourself in a story. If, in my own words, that's what I took away. And for field blends, especially, we want to be offering something really very unique, but also very immersive. So much like what Erin was just saying, it's important that people touch, feel, so they can experience more than one sense when they're interacting with the experience itself and the product itself. But as far as when we are working with clients, I think one of my favorites was a brand that they have a food line, an artisanal food line, and they have women made, and it's a women-led winery. And so there's a story there, like, already, right? And though the food was organically sourced and grown, there's so much that consumers, millennials and Gen Z, are asking questions about. Maybe not always primarily, but we want to know if that's something that you're up to. And they were kind of wondering how to expand their reach when it was things like chocolate covered almonds and, I don't know, jams and things like that. It was very cool products. But how could they translate to beyond their traditional cheese board, for example, or entertainment board? And so I worked with them to basically connect with some really amazing, diverse voices in the wine industry that were interested in creating pairings with those particular products in a way that spoke most to them. And my advice to the client was, don't tell them what to do, ask them what they would do. And I think that we don't do that on campaigns very often. And when you are a small business and you don't have a ton of money to spend on some kind of influencer campaign or put a ton of marketing dollars into some really amazing assets, et cetera, like there's still ways to leverage your story that bring in a lot of connection, but it's just that you should be listening to people as much as you're talking at them. Actually, you should be listening to them more. And so that campaign was really successful. And what we figured out was, in addition to the chocolate covered almonds and the jams, they also had hot sauce and they had hot honey and they had honey made from local bees and all of these extra things. And so we ended up with content that was about like what mom makes for herself as a snack when she's also making her kids a snack, and how that pairs with the wines that they had, or how someone else would really love to lean into spicy foods to put those on the board or entertainment board that they might pair with those wines, and what that story means to them. And so now all of a sudden the brand has more touch points. They have more things that they can say by letting other people say it for them. And again, it just comes back to listening. And I think with all of that, all of those content creators, their reach was millennials and younger from across the United States. And we're not talking about 100,000 followers or anything like that. I'm not a social campaign master really, but we're talking about people who have really high engagement and who feel strongly about where they come from, who they're about, and what their values are when they interact with products. And it was very effective, 12 people out there talking about a brand in a different way. And that brought in a lot of new people and connection to the company. This is one example.
Erin, do you have an example of how maybe at Lakewood you've changed your approach to storytelling specifically to attract more visitors to the winery?
Absolutely. I love what Maryam was saying about listening, because being in the tasting room for years, people have said, do you have a restaurant here? Where can we go and get something to eat? And we have picnic tables out there, and we were selling local cheeses and crackers and things like that. And we upped those sales. But then we started introducing food trucks on the weekend, because a lot of people, when they're visiting, they don't have the intention, I'm going to check into this winery, get a case and leave. They want to have an experience there. They want to have a glass of wine. They want to sit in the vineyards. They want to have lunch. They want to spend time with their friends. So having kind of adapted what a weekend looks like at the winery has really brought in new people.
So Daniel, I'm curious, when you hear Erin speak, how might a small winery like her that seems to be moving in a very determined direction to bring in more tourism, how might they embrace technology? Because I know for some of us, even me as a writer, you start out writing pen and paper, and then you get a laptop, and then suddenly we have all of these social media things we have to do. So sometimes adjusting to the technology is the hardest part, and embracing it.
100%. And I think it's about measurement, right? They always say you can't optimize what you don't measure. So really understanding who are these visitors who are coming. We always think about first party data. So names and email addresses, and also context of who these customers are coming through the door. And there are ways, and we built some of these technology to, if I book for all of us on the panel, generally speaking, the winery only get my information. And that's missing out on a ton of first party data that you can go market to, you can get other people and their friends in the door. So it's setting up the infrastructure, setting up the ways to capture that data and understand, again, the context of who they are. Are they new to the region? Are they new to your brand? And really communicating them with them in different ways. What you'll see is what's driving consumers. So maybe it is the food that brought me to the winery. And if that's what it is, then you can start to change the messaging as well and do marketing around that, understanding what it is that's going to drive the impact that you're looking for.
So Diana, with you working with so many regions, clearly there's certain, I'm sure, model for success, but you also can have a cookie cutter approach, right? So that can be challenging as well.
No, absolutely. It's virtually impossible. But we, no matter how frustrated we get with our suppliers and the fact that there is no availability in high season, and they, lock us out of availability, and they say, look, guys, we can't sell tools through you anymore. We're also really excited and very happy for them when that does happen, when they have this success. And, that means that wine tourism has finally arrived because one, we have come online, two, payment is seamless. The communication with the client is beneficial, and that makes the entire industry look good. So we always like to celebrate those success stories. But where we see that works really well, and that doesn't matter where and how, is with most of our suppliers, if you're talking about a winery or a small chateau somewhere in the south of France, or a small winery in Croatia, as you said, they don't have the budgets, they don't have the marketing to put into PPC and into Facebook ads, and to go and participate at trade shows focused on wine tourism and so on and so forth. But what they do and where they succeed is when they focus on user-generated content. And that gives them an incredible ability to formulate a dialogue with their customers and to stay in touch with these customers for many, many years to come. So where wineries and tour operators and wine hotels are encouraging the people who stay there, the people who visit the winery, the people who take the tour, to take content and to feature that particular provider in the content, that's where that kind of aspect of, let's say, that viral effect has more of a chance of happening. That's where the sharing becomes, caring, and that's where that referral system really works, and they become so intertwined with the customer that they immediately have a reason to engage with them, to capture their information, to stay in touch with them, whether it's via Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And those campaigns can be so amazing for a smaller or medium-sized business, because it's a lot more, I guess it's more manageable. And that's what we see. Obviously, when it comes to larger suppliers and bigger organizations, that is complicated. And as you've said, there is no cookie cutter approach, and we are seeing many other challenges because the larger suppliers, they have to compete against so much more. And then it's, it becomes frankly, a money game. But for the small and medium-sized suppliers who are so close to our heart, because we know that they're getting started, that it's mostly a family business, that it's a passion business. We really like to see them embrace this user-generated content and think of campaigns that bring them closer to the consumer and get them talking to the consumer for many, many years to come.
Great. I think often the fear maybe with embracing technology is that you lose that human touch, but actually gives you other ways of staying in touch. So I'd love to hear, for example, at Lakewood, are you doing a lot of, are you segmenting your audience, for example, your newer visitors with those who are already maybe wine club members? How are you doing outreach?
Yes, and we are constantly evolving our clubs too. When we began our case discount club, it was exactly that. You bought a case and you got a discount. And we have a lot of loyal customers that still expect that. So that is one segment. And now we're seeing newer people come in and ask about the wine club, again, going back to listening. So we had to adapt and add a wine club, which is something that we're more familiar with in California, where there are shipments that happen 3 times a year. So now we've got the wine club segment, we've got the loyal segment, and then we've got the first time visitor segment. So yes, we are definitely speaking differently to these groups.
Great. And how do you, so for example, I'm guessing, Maryam, tell us a little bit about what a typical Field Blends group looks like, the demographics of that group.
Awesome. So what we're doing is small by increment compared to offering an amazing array of wine tourism experiences. What we're doing through Field Blends is helping basically underrepresented wine professionals discover often underrepresented regions. And I grew up near the Finger Lakes, so I hope no one takes offense to me putting it in that lane for a moment, just so that I can say, when I left the Finger Lakes, it shocked me how many folks had never been, and I lived in New York City at the time. So it was hard for me to hear that. And even in my journey as a wine professional, there continue to be regions that are doing absolutely amazing work that are less likely to be discovered simply because of the internet or media up until this point, or you name it, right? And so I think everyone can identify there's been at least minimal frustration with that. And so with Field Blends, I want to celebrate the regions, but I also want to create access to these regions for high-end conscious consumers that want the direct conversation with proprietors and winemakers, farmers, sustainability experts. But I also want to be able to bring people along on that journey. And we have introduced scholarships from the beginning of our program. And those scholarships are awarded to diverse wine professionals. So it's important. I know I'm saying things that might be confusing. That's not a traditional model that we have consumers, which we are all consumers, but consumers, wine enthusiasts, let's say, and wine professionals in one room together. But if we don't start working to lift the veil between those two things, and we'll continue to have confusion around a lot of distracting factors when at the end of the day, who's working the land, where the grapes grow, the region itself are the things that people should be most enamored with and most informed about so that they can be empowered to take action to support those regions and those people doing really, really important work to sustain the regions we're visiting. So the scholarship programs, they're very new. I think we've seen a lot of scholarship programs grow in the past few years, but what's different, I think, is we're working with the regional boards to create those scholarships. We're trying to remove some onus from individual wineries working to attract these customers to their markets. And that's incredibly important because it also speaks a narrative on behalf of the region that you all are wanting to attract these professionals and consumers to your region. Just some quick stats. Our attendees for Field Blends are between the ages of 22 and 42. So like the ones y'all are saying you want. And we went to Walla Walla last year. I got my enology and vit degree there. And every single person on the trip had never been to the region before. So again, small numbers, but really big ripple impacts. Since then, by word of mouth and feedback and all of the amazing stories that we've heard from folks is like, I'm still mentored by someone that I met on that trip, or I just sent my family out there, or I just sent friends out there. I've already booked my trip back. This is like economic stimulation on a small level, but one that's going to have impact year over year over year. And with consumer groups that particularly wine regions just have historically not included, you know. So for Finger Lakes, which is coming up in June, we took what we learned from our trip to Walla Walla and incorporated it in. It's as important to highlight the agriculture in the region as it is the wine, because that builds the story of the region and people fall in love with the region even more. And my structure for Field Blends is also, as I said, I'm based in Napa. And so it was important to me, even though I have community in both regions, to also have someone who I think really represents the region be our community partner. So for Field Blends Finger Lakes, Maya Johnson-Dunn is our community partner and has been working on the program alongside me for over a year now. So that's a little bit of how it works. And there's people in the room. I know Brittany's not here, but Seneca Lake Wine Trail is a sponsor, and Finger Lakes Wine Alliance is a sponsor. And we just I just think everybody has recognized how important it is, even though it's a small group. It's one of nearly 100% of people who don't get to experience these regions and who these regions don't experience often either.
Great, thank you. You know, one of the maybe really obvious innovations is recognizing that pretty much everybody from any demographic you can think of enjoys wine, right? And so for so long, it's been targeted towards maybe one group of people. So I'm curious, Diana, something that I've been hearing conversations here earlier today, how important it is for people to be able to see themselves when they click on that website, to feel that they would be comfortable visiting that place. So is that something that you're aware of as, you know, you're advertising these different experiences, the imagery, the story, so that people would feel like, okay, I haven't been there, but I'll be comfortable. They're embracing new wine drinkers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is our biggest challenge, as you can imagine. You know, it's very, very hard to get a lot of our providers to still understand the fact that a picture really is not 1,000 words, but $1,000. You know, it can have a really big impact. And we find that a lot of the time our providers, they like to spend time on defining their product, on, you know, making the wine and so on and so forth. But the marketing side of things is where they maybe don't have as much time to assign to that task. So the on-page experience is extremely important, because this type of consumer, their brain is wired very differently. It's a very different, very different generations that we're dealing with. But the younger the consumer is, the more likely they are to respond to very quick messaging. So the image is the first impact, the tagline, what is it that makes this particular experience stand out? And we always talk to our suppliers about the titles and the first line of that description. And sometimes for a very, very long time, it was very hard to explain, why the first line should not start with the fact that with something as nebulous as this is the most amazing experience that you will have in Tuscany, Like, yes, of course, they know that already, they're here because they're expecting to buy an amazing experience. But what is it that they're going to be getting? Is this going to be, is there going to be some amazing cheese that they have, that they have not tasted before? Is there going to be a dog that is going to welcome them? And, this dog is really famous for something. Or, are they going to do a competition when they arrive there? Those are the kinds of things that you have to put there at the top, because that's how you can differentiate yourself from, the other 1,000 or tens of thousands of experience providers that you are competing against. So we are always, and in our job as well, we're always searching for things and ways in which we can market ourselves in a more efficient manner. But it's something that the imagery is something that I still haven't quite been able to understand. Why is it so difficult to get someone in our industry to invest in photography and good quality videography? That doesn't have to be done, by a professional cameraman, or by a drone, or by a team of 6 videographers. It can be something that is done actually on your iPhone, because iPhones these days are just so proficient, or a very good smartphone. But we still can't do that. So very often our team has to kind of go there and spend a few days, do this, adjust the pictures, and then suddenly, over a week, we're seeing that the sales are coming in. So then, it kind of starts clicking in. So it's a really, really important factor. And I just wish that we did that on a regular basis, every month, every quarter. We need to update. We need to always talk about the new things that are happening at the winery. We had a really successful winery, and they were amazing because they were announcing every single thing that was happening at the winery. Like they had a baby, they announced it. They got a new dog, they announced it. They got some new bees, they announced the fact that they got new bees at the property. And it was just so exciting, because constantly there was something that was feeding the customers, and they were getting a sense of kind of attachment and a bond with that particular place.
Thank you. Daniel, I'm wondering, how do you walk someone through? They have the great story, they have maybe all these wonderful moments that Diana mentioned, but they're really reluctant maybe to invest in software. Or how do you get them to that point where they see that would make their lives easier, will be good for the bottom line? What are some of the things that you get to take them over to the other side there?
Yeah, we often think about what is the goal of wine tourism from a brand side, right? It's not being a tour provider, right? In the end of the day, it's selling wine, right? And so understanding that it is a means to an end, that it is a form of marketing, it is a form of engagement, and you would always test every form of marketing, right? If brands are doing a Facebook marketing, you don't just invest in Facebook advertising and wake up a year later and hope that it worked. Right? You wake up the next day, you change it and you iterate it, and you actually adapt. So the brands that we work with see a very immediate outcome of what is actually converting. And sometimes that might be, for Diana's point, like investing in the right photography, or talking about it the right way, or changing the experience. But we're tying that to sales. And so that's part of what our platform does, is really being able to tie that to outcomes. Is this change that you're making, or this new tour that you're offering, is that leading to more sales or memberships, or wine club memberships? Because ultimately that is the bottom line.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the age issue, but I guess we can't help it because it's in every discussion that we have about wine. So I'm sure we've all read the Silicon Valley Bank State of the Wine Industry report. That's still a really good report, regardless what other issues may have happened with the bank. And it says that consumers older than 60 are the only growth segment. And younger wine buyers are increasingly less engaged with the wine category, which I have to say surprised me, maybe because I'm kind of in the wine bubble. I feel like so many younger people I know do love wine, but I do wonder, is there a sweet spot where we're not just targeting those 60 and up and those are the millennials? Is there just something that maybe brings these groups together so we don't have this completely fragmented experiences? Because that can also be a challenge for a small winery, I would think, to have maybe too many segments. Erin, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to connect those groups because everyone was looking for an escape. And we were a wonderful place for people aged 21 to 99 come and remove themselves from the craziness of the pandemic. So we offered outdoor space, we offered tastings, we offered a time to get away from living, if you were living in a city, living in your tiny little apartment, even homeschooling your kids. We offered a really good escape. Now that things have opened up, here we are in 2023, people have the opportunity to travel to Europe, visit some chateaus, go to wherever they want to go. It's just a different world. So now it is a challenge to kind of find what people are really searching for and find a way to deliver that. I mean, that is our goal at the winery. And now that there are more options, so are people looking for that girlfriend's getaway? Are people looking for the multi-generational trip? And can we provide that? So it's kind of reconfiguring what we can deliver based on what people want.
Are you finding, I'm curious, Diane, I know some wineries that I visited just, for assignments, almost the wine is secondary for certain experiences. I know one winery in California has a beautiful theater that seats maybe about 1,000 people, and I saw Los Lobos concert there, right? So there were so many people there who went for the music. Oh, and by the way, we make wine too. Is that a smart strategy? Is that something maybe that could backfire? What do you think?
I think that is very clever. And I think that is the only way to keep on attracting the same customer back again and again. It's so much more expensive to buy new customers than it is to bring the same customer back to your cellar door. And I think for a very long time, the wine industry pre-COVID was just getting a little bit complacent. We thought that kind of standardized cellar door experience of, coming in, you're part of the club, here are 6 wines, here are some crackers, thank you very much, would you like to buy some wine? See you soon. That was it. And we were, and for a long time, people were associating, especially young people were associating wine tourism with something that is quite old fashioned. And, people like to do as when they are retired and they've got nothing better to do. And then the pandemic gave a lot of wineries and a lot of tour operators and wine hotels, they've gone through complete restructuring phase. There were those who were sitting around during the pandemic and did not do much, but there were those who completely revolutionized things. And, they came back with a vengeance in many ways. So now the best-selling products on our website are, for example, a Douro Valley boat cruise, wine tasting, lunch, and cultural visit of a place called Mateusz Palace. The second bestseller is a bike and wine and lunch tour at a chateau. The third more popular one is a wine safari experience in Barcelona. All of these are being hosted by wineries or co-hosted with wineries, and they are incredible ways to bring demographic from all across all different age groups. Fair to say that we've shifted from normal bikes to e-bikes now to be able to incorporate those who those who don't want to exercise and wine necessarily to join the tour as well. But as my colleagues have said earlier, it's a lot about offering the experience, elevating that experience to the next level. And I get very excited when I go to a winery that I hadn't been to in 6 months' time, and I see that they have added a new experience. So, for example, they've added a picnic by the olive trees experience, which is so inexpensive for them to do, but it's something that is just so exciting and attractive for a customer who has been there before. Or again, add some bikes to the portfolio so that next time when you go there, you can actually do a bike ride through the vines. And it's just making it more attractive for various age groups, and making it more exciting for people to keep on going back. For me, one of the more interesting case scenarios is actually the case scenario of Moldova, which is where I'm from. And Moldova has seen a complete regeneration of the wine tourism sector. It's very sad that there is a war currently on its border, but mostly thanks to investment from programs like Chemonix, the USAID, Moldova over the last 20 years has really reinvented its wine tourism project. So right now, when you go to Moldova, you see wineries that are state-of-art wineries with hotels, with amazing. I can see that somebody's just been. I'm so excited to see people going there. And I went. What I love seeing is every single time when I go there, I see that they've done something different. And that is because for Moldova, they regard locals as their number one customer. They don't think about tourists, international tourists. They don't think about the fact that people are going to come in and visit, because obviously it's a small country, difficult to access, especially right now. But during COVID, they did that, and as a result, they have now got a super high repeat customer rate. And as you've said, they are doing concerts, they're doing festivals, they're doing rosé all day type of picnics. Things that are increasing the average basket size from 30 euros to 300, and that is really exciting, and it's creating that bond with the consumer. As Daniel has said, it's about selling wine for these wineries. So now suddenly these people are coming back, they're buying wine, they're popping in, saying hello, and then can't wait to be back for another event. So the loyalty is definitely there, even without them having a wine club.
Great, thank you. We don't have Brittany here today, but one of the things we also want to explore is, the wine trail, right? So you have individual wineries with different personalities, but you share a region. So I know that Lakewood is very active with the wine trail. So how does that work? Maybe someone from regions that don't quite have that organization yet, being together as part of a trail.
We're very fortunate to live on the Seneca Lake Wine Trail and be in such a collaborative area where we play off each other's strengths. So every different committee for the trail, we've got marketing, we have special events, we have a brand new revenue committee that we needed to start because we in 2020 did not have events, and that is really the fuel for the fire here for the wine trails. So what's wonderful is that we kind of share experiences about what works. We share data. We share what sales, what events generate the most sales. And every year we reevaluate how we can best move forward. And like the wineries that are always reinventing themselves and adding new events, so is the trail. For the first time this year, we just completed an online auction called the Seneca Lake Wine and Experience Auction, which raised over $11,000 with just individual wineries presenting very unique experiences, everything from a virtual tasting with a winemaker to lunch in Anthony Road. I see John over there. So these are ways to really build relationships with the wineries. And then once you become tied into one of these wineries, have a great experience there, you're going to trust that winery to recommend another winery on the trail and make that part of your visit as well. So we are building off each other's strengths.
Someone made a comment earlier, don't underestimate the power of maybe 1 or 2, 3 early wineries to be the ones that kind of help to elevate that region. Since we're talking about USA and beyond, around this time last year, I was in Umbria and Montefalco, which is, central Italy, which, has been making wine forever, but it really wasn't until Arnaldo Caprai, his Sagrantino wine, started getting attention and scores. And now it's like a must visit for Italian wine lovers, and other producers were started getting interest and are also getting the scores and the attention. And now it's a bit of a tourist destination. They've opened up new little hotels and, they're building that infrastructure. So again, it was really one producer that kind of was the gateway for that happening for the region. But you mentioned data, so I'd love to get Daniel's, you said, the trail, looking at what are the key things that people should look at once they've invested in the software. How do you know what's working? How do you adjust?
Yeah, great question. We have a framework here at AnyRoad that we talk about one-dimensional metrics and three-dimensional metrics. One-dimensional metrics are usually leading indicators. So how many people came in this month or this year, maybe even how many bottles were sold. Three-dimensional is really looking at the impact of those experiences that you're creating. So if you're having a concert, it's not just that we had 300 people here. How many ended up joining the wine club? How many ended up coming back as repeat visitors, bringing their friends and family? So it's kind of like a tertiary impact, but it's super important, right? It's not just about having those people buying that ticket or paying for that tour. So that is a framework that we use very, very often. And again, having that infrastructure there allows you to say, hey, these are the events, these are the tours that are actually driving the needle. It's also about having a really tight feedback loop. So when we talk about capturing data, it's not just quantitative, it's also qualitative. So understanding before they go out to TripAdvisor, before they go out and tell their friends, having a feedback loop where you can understand what's working and what's not. We take that another step further and run it through machine learning and AI to actually surface recommendations, like how to actually improve the experiences. And sometimes they're small things. Sometimes it's the temperature, or the music's too loud, but you can actually see which ones are affecting change on purchase behavior, brand perception, things down the line.
So social media, I imagine with your audience, probably, Maryam, they're hitting, all of Instagram, TikTok. But a small company probably can't do everything. So for you, do you see some platforms as having a bigger return than others in terms of getting the word out for field blends?
So I'm not a TikToker, but I have seen some TikToks. I think, one really effective tool still is Instagram. I think especially because of sales conversions and I think the acquisition is there a little bit easier from a demographic standpoint. I think the age variation for a user of Instagram is much broader than it is for TikTok. And of course, with TikTok, there's a slew of really of users that don't even apply to our markets because they're not old enough to drink wine. But I do think what works on platforms, I'm going to speak mostly about Instagram because it's what Maryam and company uses, but is a mix of organic and like user generated content and also some advertising. So the only thing that we advertise for Maryam and company is field blends. And that's because we want to acquire more people for those programs. And it's a great sales tool for it. I was like listening about the conversation around imagery, because that's really at the end of the day, what you're doing on any social platform is telling a story visually. And what we've done is we now luckily are in our second year and we have assets from our first go around. And those assets, just in looking at our advertising based, we had one stock image where I'm holding a glass. So I have a bit of pigment in my skin. I'm holding a glass of wine up. And that got a lot of traction during our advertising period last year. We had some other photos that were, I think, what we would be categorizing as more stock imagery that barely ever took off from ads. And we were doing A/B testing on purpose. We want to know what people, how they want to interact with field blends and why. So this year, our ad with the most traction is a photo of everybody who was at field blends last year. And there's no wine in the photo. The photo is a bunch of us standing outside of a soil pit with dirt in our hands, and everyone's face is bright as a light bulb because they're like, this is really cool. And of course, we're talking about a diverse group of individuals experiencing that as well. So now we have this tangible, like idea of what we might experience during our trip, as well as who might be there. And, you know, I think last year was just from the side of the scholarships, we did attract a lot of young professionals because this is about creating access. And so some of the more established wine professionals don't necessarily need or want this kind of immersive experience, but there's so many out there that haven't had access to it. So I think we attracted younger people by default there. But even this year for field blends right now, our age group will be anywhere in young 20s, and we have ticket purchasers in their 60s. So it's a different group. Could be the region, could be the advertising. We're not really sure. But one thing I wanted to mention about imagery, because it's come up, this is the third session now where imagery has come up, is something that I think will be a result of field blends, at least, is the difference between this implementation and performative imagery. So what I mean to say is I think a lot of folks, even in the past few years, have been asking themselves, well, I don't have that customer, so how could I take a picture of that customer in my property? First of all, we can attract that customer over time and build that acquisition. But in order for them to come, they want to see themselves. So how do we do that? Finger Lakes Wine Country is working with field blends, and it's an example, same thing with Seneca Lake, especially if you know your regional body has funds earmarked for this particular type of work of bringing people to the region and then telling that story, that can help benefit you too. And it goes back to the regional boards and everything, but I just think it's important that when you're considering how to create the imagery that might seem more inclusive and welcoming, that you're going to the groups that that themselves want to be represented, instead of imagining up or creating a fake experience, because it's very clear as soon as you walk through the door if you are telling the truth in an image or not, right?
Yeah, there's that fine line between wanting to be more open but not pandering, making sure that it's authentic.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a change in the demographics at Lakewood, Erin? Are you seeing different types of?
Absolutely. Not just in our regular tasting room traffic, but also people purchasing events for the Seneca Lake Wine Trail events, which has been fantastic. And I think a lot of that was born out of the pandemic. In a lot of ways, it has benefited the wineries to welcome more people from areas that we were not really seeing people. New York City has really exploded in our tasting rooms. We are seeing a lot more people
I'm sorry.
It's a dream come true, Wanda. No, it's fantastic. And the Washington, D.C. area and Baltimore, and we will see this trend continue to grow.
So I feel like Daniel just has a mine of information there. Is this something you're able to track? Like, do we know? I mean, just looking at the US market demographics, and who are the folks visiting wineries beyond age? What else do we know? Male, female, professions. What do we know?
Yeah, so I don't have the data in front of me right now, but like it is a wide spectrum, right? And I think it depends on exactly that, like the region, the brand. Different brands have identified that there are certain demographics that are converting, again, buying more wine, joining wine clubs at a different rate. So, you know, and to your point, Wanda, earlier on, like everyone's drinking wine. It doesn't matter, you know, where you're from, what you look like, how old you are. But I think it's about how they're drinking it. I think it's about how they're experiencing wineries. And so it's up to every individual winery and potentially region to really understand this is the demographic that's most important to us. Right. And it might be an older crowd. Like it's not that every winery should go after the younger crowd. Some are going to be too expensive out of budget range. So it's just about it's really about knowing your consumer.
Sure.
I was just going to say, I agree with you, Daniel. Also, like field blends didn't set out to attract millennials, for example. Like we're driven with a value proposition, right? Like we want to tell the story of sustainable and sustainability and diversity, but we want to tell it through the lens of food, wine, agriculture, and labor. So like that's what people experience first. This offbeat Epicurean adventure is how we lead. That's our tagline, Deanna. Hopefully it sounds good. But like, that's where we lead. We're not necessarily like targeting a specific age group or demographic, more so the people who have who are values aligned with us, which I think speaks to also how we tell our stories to attract wine tourists.
You know, I'm Gen X, and sometimes we feel like the generation that everyone forgets about. And it's true, but you know, it is so interesting because it is great going out in New York and I see millennials. Clearly, I mean, the fact that they will invest in a beautiful meal and beautiful wines, and I'll look over and I'm like, oh, they're drinking a better bottle than we are. So it's nice to see that passion. But I've even seen in my own friends, but I see kind of the Hollywood impact. Like they want to have the White Lotus experience, minus the murder. I'm sorry, but spoiler. But what is like? Is that a pressure on wineries to deliver these experiences that people are seeing in television and film, that people really want to feel like a winemaker for a day or have this glamorous experience that they saw on television? How do you balance the reality with the entertainment that people expect?
Oh my gosh, that is such a loaded question. But so this is just a true story of something that happened a couple weeks ago. So some of you know my husband is the vineyard manager, third generation at Lakewood. And he was walking through the tasting room, and this couple, as they were leaving, said, "I can't believe you had us seated next to the farmhand in the tasting room." So I was feeling like, well, that's really just such a disconnect between the reality of being at a winery. It is a working farm. We are going to be dirty. We are going to be working in the fields. And I think that what they wanted was the Instagram farmer, right? The young millennial in the flannel who's like coming in with like the little shears and, you know, taste these grapes. And that's just not what's happening. So yes, we are very thoughtful about what we put out on social media, but we're also honest because we are farmers at our core. So
Diana, is that something that you've encountered where you get feedback? You know, because it's true. I mean, part of this is filtering maybe negative feedback, but people had an unrealistic idea of what it means to visit a winery or a wine region.
You know, I'm first of all, I'm so sorry. Those customers sound like a complete disaster. They should not be allowed to come back. But you know, I think that you know, I think we're really lucky in many ways because when it comes to wine tourism, just as it is with the providers of experience, 99.9% of times that our customers are really nice. Now, we also deal with a luxury side of the business. So we have a concierge business, and there we'll do, you know, the helicopter rides, you know, arrive by helicopter to a chateau in Saint-Emilion, and then, you know, air balloon rides over, I don't know, the Douro Valley. And we were really concerned because in my previous life, I dealt a lot with the luxury market, and I was so worried about it because like you know, I was thinking, my gosh, these individuals, they're going to be expecting a certain kind of service, you know, they'll need everything, you know, babysitter, chef, you know, toothbrush holder, everything is going to have to be there, you know, everyone. So we were worried, but we were so taken aback by the fact that in wine tourism, even the uber wealthy or the customers who are seeking luxury experiences, they have a sense of kind of gratitude, and, you know, they're quite gracious, and they tend to be very excited and quite understanding of the fact that winemaking is farming, and that winemaking is a lot about going back and sitting down with a winemaker and having dinner. And it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be Michelin star restaurant level. It's going to be the complete opposite end of that. And that is what you're signing up for, because you can have the Michelin restaurant in Hong Kong and in New York and in Paris. But when you go to the winery, you expect something completely different. And I think that we as an industry are just not very good at communicating that a lot of the time and explaining that, you know, this is what you get the authenticity, you get the realism, you get the excitement about working with your hands, about the fact that we are so connected to this. And interesting that you mentioned the White Lotus experience. The moment the White Lotus came out, we actually created the ultimate. It is called the ultimate White Lotus experience. It's just kind of to give you. So we are doing that wine tour in Sicily, and when we were watching, my head of partnerships is Italian, and she has spent the vast majority of her life in Sicily. And she says, oh, I love it. I love the fact that everybody is watching this White Lotus TV series and is thinking that Sicily is all luxury and high end and 5-star hotels, and then they arrive in Sicily, and it's juxtaposed. I mean, Sicily is very rustic. It's extremely is very different from what the series portrays. But I think that it is up to us to communicate that the White Lotus experience, if that's what you want, you are going to get this, and this is what your expectations should be, and we are here to deliver this. But it's not going to be 5-star hotels and antibacterial gel every at every corner. It's just not part of the experience. And I think that when it comes to the luxury end of the market, or let's say when you are talking about offering this Uber experience in the high end market, we are finding that 9 out of 10 cases, they will not care about sleeping in on a very expensive bed. They will not care about the fact that the furniture is going to be, made out of some luxury wood. They will just want to be immersed in this experience. It's a little bit like, it's not a little bit, it's a lot like escapism from the world that they live in, which the vast majority of the time is so different from this. And we are so lucky because we work and we live in this industry and we interact with these individuals. But we need to understand that the rest of the world, especially corporate world, they do not deal with individuals who are as open, as kind, as warm, and as welcoming, going to invite you into their house and feed you cheese and give you wine. So for them, this is what they're buying. And we just need to get better at marketing this.
Great, thank you. Well, I'd like to offer you each a moment, maybe just to give a final piece of advice, because I know looking around the room, I see some winemakers, winery owners, people in media. So some burning, piece of advice that you really want to get across today. I'll start with you, Maryam.
Let's see. As it applies to wine tourism, I think I would just end the way that I started, which is the best way to bring more people in is to listen to what they want and offer that in your own way, and to not shy away from being creative, and to not shy away from letting other people tell you what their experience of your brand is.
Daniel?
Yeah, as a reminder that the experience that you have at the winery or outside of the winery is your most valuable form of marketing. That selling a tasting or a tour, it should not be transactional. It shouldn't be, give me $20, sign up through Eventbrite or Talk or ShowClicks, and I'll give you a tour. That's the beginning of a relationship. And if you think about it like that and you treat it like that, then you'll pull the pieces together to make sure that you're actually driving conversions, you're driving loyalty, and actually driving the bottom line.
Great. Diana?
I'm going to say, I guess I'm going to leave 3 thoughts of 3 things that I would want our world of wine tourism to take on board. I think that in the next conversations or round tables that you're having, thinking about how you can make your business better and how you can welcome more tourists to your cellar door and spend less on acquiring those tourists, I would like to ask you to seriously think about the technology and how important it is to be technologically minded and to make the booking and the payment system a process as easy and as seamless as possible. I'd like for people to think better about marketing themselves and engaging with the audience. It doesn't have to be tens of thousands of dollars spent on advertising, but it's about having a voice behind your brand and making sure that that voice is consistent. And the third thing that is really important is to have an ongoing dialogue with your customers through various channels. Don't just stick to, social media. Think about email, think about, phone calls, think about engaging with them and getting advice on how you can get better and how your product can be constantly improved. And that is how you're always going to end up innovating and bringing the same people to your cellar door again and again. And constantly sell the wine to them and bring them a little bit of sunshine into their glass every single time when they're at home and depressed like I am at the moment in London. So yeah, that's my 3 cents.
Thank you, Erin.
Something that has worked very well for us is continuity. I think it's important for people when they visit your winery that they see faces that they've seen before, and they feel like they have a true connection with the people who are in the tasting room. I also think that we should be looking at tourism outside of wine tourism for ideas, because we keep looking at other regions, we look at other wineries, and we're kind of, we're doing the whole license to steal with each other. But there are so many different places that we can be looking. And I think that will lead to some great ideas for the future.
Great advice. Well, we'd love to open it up to questions now. Don't be shy. Do we need a mid-afternoon stretch?
Just raise your hand if anyone has a question and come to you. Oh, a couple.
Daniel, this one's for you. You talked about the need to get more data from people who come to visit wineries, because that's a huge part of how we measure. So when people make reservations, typically it's one person, and that's the only thing that they're capturing. Do you have any insights on how that infrastructure could be built so that wineries could conceivably easily get the data capture from all the people that are joining with that one person's reservation?
Yeah, the short answer is we built it, so we should talk. The long answer is that it can be done 2 ways. It can be done through the reservation itself, where you can actually share that information, or we have a product, or there's other products out there where you can actually capture data on site. So we always think about data capture has to be a value exchange, right? My personal information is valuable, but for the right value exchange, I will give it up. Right. So thinking about what is that value exchange, and we can chat about it. There's like a whole lot of best practices that we can bring to the table as far as like what is valuable, whether that be a discount on their first purchase or something additional on site. But absolutely, and that is really important to think through, because if somebody's anonymous and they spend an afternoon with you, that's a huge missed opportunity.
I think there was one more question over here. There we go.
Thank you. When you were speaking earlier, if I understood you correctly, it said people were coming to Sicily because they were inspired in part by the White Lotus story, but they were able to provide essentially some elements of that story such that when people came, they could feel that way, maybe, and enjoy that without living in or staying in a, very expensive hotel room and that kind of thing. So I was just curious as to your thoughts in terms of wineries utilizing stories in popular media like that to leverage their wine marketing off of, even if they don't have all the elements from the popular story, which could cost them a lot of money.
Is that for Diana? Or
Yeah.
Diana?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, first thing first, we didn't steer away from the White Lotus story too much. We still incorporated the winery that, the winery is called Planeta, the winery that where the tour was conducted, and we kind of still stayed on track. But I think utilizing popular stories and I guess buying into these myths, I don't think that there is any harm in doing that. I think that it's all about how you play it. And some countries, in my opinion, are better at doing it and some are not. To me, the Italians are some of the most skillful marketeers in the world, and they're probably some of the best, marketeers in the world. There was a very interesting article in the Financial Times 2-3 days ago about how the entire Italian cuisine is basically manufactured, and most dishes that we think are Italian are not really Italian at all. But same thing applies with wineries. You'll go to Italy and you'll go to Sicily, and very often you'll go to Puglia and Campania, especially in the south, and they will have these elaborate stories about the hotel and the history of the hotel and the winery and the history of the winery. And probably only about 5%, a small fragment of that is actually true. The rest is just a very well, told story that tunes into the emotion of the person who's reading it. Now, some people would say, oh, shocking, this is a lie, this is appalling. But in my opinion, this is, comes into storytelling, and it's about the fact that everything that we do in marketing at the end of the day is about how you tell the story. And, it is embellished. Yes, there is an element of lack of truth in there. But what I think that we need to do right now is we need to move away from being shy about our skills and our attributes and the things that make us different from everyone else. And we need to put that at the forefront of our story. And I think that in the Anglo-Saxon world, we are not so good at it. The English wine tourism sector has really had an explosion, I guess. There were 20 wineries in the UK 30 years ago, and now, officially there are more than 5,000, of which, over 3,000, I think, are commercial wineries, which in my mind seems like a lot. But the English wineries are just not very good at telling their story. They just kind of assume that the consumer is going to fall in love with the wine and then come there and have an amazing experience. And that is why I think they can really learn from the Italian example of marketing, the Italian example of telling a story about a statue that, or a particular, grandmother in the family who was known for making a very special type of cookie, that was made from very, very special pistachios. And, that's a skill. And that is true to a certain extent, but that skill is not something that many people have. And that is marketing the old-fashioned way. And that kind of marketing the old-fashioned way has very much transposed itself into today's world. And I would say that still the Italians, just like they were 200 years ago, they continue to be very good, much better marketeers than we are today. And that is why Italy continues to be such an incredible destination, and it's one that is thriving again and again.
So I think we've reached the end of our panel. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add a couple of things. I guess the privilege of being the MC in reaction to what Erin said, which I think is a really important point, not just looking at ourselves, all the various wine regions, but looking what other people are doing. I think, we live in an incredible state. There's a lot of headaches about being in New York, but we have an incredible history in this state. We're right pretty close to the center of the women's suffrage movement, where that was started. We have great natural resource assets. So the Finger Lakes, you have the lakes, the waterfalls. Western New York's got a great heritage as well as being an important place for culture and agriculture. And, we have a lot of assets here in New York that are not necessarily about wine, but we can tie into to better tell our story. And, our personal philosophy, or our team philosophy at the Wine and Grape Foundation is we like to create experiences that generate FOMO, fear of missing out. So this conference is, our attempt to make people feel bad that if they didn't come here in person and if they didn't attend virtually, that they missed out on something pretty awesome like this panel conversation we had. So, if you, I know this is a value that Oscar has too, because when we were doing in-person trade tours for New York Drinks in New York, we'd kill people. Like they literally go from tasting room to tasting room, drink 10 Rieslings, and their taste buds would be shot. And Oscar was like, well, why don't we at least take them for a hike or like put them in a canoe and send them out in the middle of Seneca Lake? Maybe they'd be into that, maybe not, but that's kind of connecting to the other assets that we have. And then just the other thing is, we invested in a really great wine tourism toolkit. It's probably a little dated at this point because it's 5 years old, but if you're a member of the Wine and Grape Foundation, you can access that. We have 3 demographic profiles of target customers. All the research is based on a 5-hour drive radius from the borders of New York State. So pretty much all of the Northeast is the target demographic. I know the Seneca Lake Wine Trail has really kind of taken this toolkit and have pulled things from it. That is a good resource to start if you're kind of like, well, I got to invest in new software. What am I going to do? The other thing is Farm Credit East, again, not the perfect solution, but they've been collecting wine trail data for Seneca and Cuga Lakes for, 15 years now. And that's sort of the good baseline data to know what's happening. And those type of things, I think, we can collaborate together and invest in. So we have this data, we can make better informed decisions, and you can apply them to your individual winery. So, it's not impossible. We can get it done, and I'm getting the hook. So thank you again to the panel.